Please be aware, in this podcast series we talk about all areas of safeguarding, which some people may find upsetting. So please make sure you're okay listening to today's topic. Be mindful of those around you, such as children, that you might not want to listen in. Hi, I'm SSS Safeguarding Director Sam Preston.
And I'm former head teacher and content author Sarah Spinks.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to Safeguarding Conversations. Today we're focusing on something that affects more children than maybe many realise, and that's dyslexia. So what it looks like in the classroom, how we can support children practically, and why this is such a safeguarding issue, not just an educational one. And just like with other neurodiverse conditions we've discussed, we want to be really clear, we're not experts in dyslexia diagnosis or intervention, but we are safeguarding practitioners. And what we bring to the conversation is a focus on how unmet learning needs can create vulnerability socially, emotionally, and academically.
Exactly. So today's guiding question is, how can schools recognise dyslexia early, respond with compassion, and ensure every child feels safe, capable and included?
So let's begin with the basics. Dyslexia is a specific learning difficulty. It's a lifelong neurological difference that affects reading, writing, memory, and organisation. But it doesn't affect intelligence.
And it doesn't look the same in every child. I think that's why we need to ask, are we mistaking signs of struggle for laziness or distraction, or are we tuned in to what's really going on?
Yeah, and I think that's such an important question, Sarah. So I think there are some things, some key signs that we can watch out for that are specific to this. Reversing letters like B and D, difficulty blending sounds, avoiding reading or writing, trouble remembering instructions, messy handwriting or slow copying, and emotional signs like frustration, withdrawal, or disruptive behaviour.
And these might seem like classroom issues, but they can lead to emotional harm, isolation, and persistent low self-esteem if they're misunderstood or ignored.
Exactly. And that's where safeguarding comes in, because unmet need is a form of vulnerability.
And when we recognise a child may have dyslexia, our job is to adapt, not to wait for a diagnosis.
Yes, absolutely. And safeguarding means acting before, where we can, before the damage is done. So think visual aids and colour-coded resources, clear chunked instructions with visual objectives, alternative ways to record learning like oral responses or mind maps, phonics-based instruction with repetition and structure, and above all, patience and encouragement.
And I think we should be asking, is this classroom a place where dyslexic children feel safe to try or afraid to fail?
And that one question should really shape everything, shouldn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Children with dyslexia often struggle with routines, time concepts, or transitions. I know my son is definitely on this spectrum. These can all become flashpoints for anxiety or distress.
Yeah. So what can schools do? Use visual schedules and checklists, allow extra processing time, provide quiet corners for focus or that decompression, offer success experiences in subjects like art, sport, music, or practical STEM.
And it's all about reducing the cognitive load and
Yeah.
boosting confidence.
Yeah, because emotional safety is, academic safety too.
Yeah, and here's something we hear a lot. We always knew something was wrong, but no one listened.
Yeah, and that's devastating, isn't it? Because for many families, the path to diagnosis and support can feel long and lonely.
So I think we should again ask the question of, Are we building bridges with families or unintentionally making them feel blamed or excluded?
Yeah. I mean, support starts with non judgmental communication, sharing practical home strategies like audiobooks or flashcards, helping with referrals is another big one, and explaining those next steps, signposting to local dyslexia associations or peer support networks.
And never forget, I think it's important to say, dyslexia is not about low intelligence, which I think you said
Absolutely.
earlier, Sam. So every conversation must reaffirm that message for the child and the parent.
And if you're noticing patterns, don't wait. Start gathering, work examples, classroom observations, completed checklists, pupil voice reflections.
And then bring it into the Senko, and they might suggest in-school screening, things like lucid COPS or dyslexia portfolio, or referral to a specialist teacher or an ed psych, or checks for co-occurring conditions like ADHD or dyspraxia, because they can often come as a package of different behaviors and conditions.
Absolutely. And one of the things I'd add to that is you can often have a child just slightly different to this. My child had difficulty with number recognition and number organization, but was absolutely top stream across the board for everything else. And I had a real struggle because with the fact that she was avoiding doing anything at all to do with numeracy was seen as being disruptive, or she was actually told, well, you can't just do all the things you like to do. And there was never any question about whether that was something that she actually found hard to do. And she wasn't actually diagnosed until she went to university
Yeah.
and it was recognized.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
I think a child may be excelling very differently in other areas of learning, but the fact that they may just not be at the same rate or are avoiding, our first thought shouldn't be avoidance being difficult or whatever. I think we have to really look further from that. But
Absolutely.
and whether or not a child receives a formal diagnosis, they may still be eligible for SEN support or reasonable adjustments.
Absolutely. Because again, early support reduces harm. Waiting isn't neutral, it's damaging.
Yeah. And schools don't need to work in isolation. If you're part of a trust or a cluster, collaboration is a powerful safeguard.
Yeah, and you can share specialist staff or dyslexia leads, create
Yeah.
shared resource banks and intervention templates, run joint training or dyslexia awareness weeks, apply for joint funding to support identification or provision, work together to support each other.
I mean, I think it's asking that question, at the moment, what's happening? Are we kind of duplicating effort across schools, independently? Or should we be building something stronger together?
Absolutely. And for some pupils, standard adjustments aren't enough.
Yeah.
That's when assistive technology or targeted programs can become key.
Absolutely. And I know from, I was speaking about my daughter, she was actually given technology and it really made a huge, huge difference. And something very, very simple. She found it very, very difficult to tell the time on a clock face. And so she basically then moved across to having a digital readout where, she was just looking at a 24-hour clock. So that was it. She was able to determine the correct time. And I can't tell you how much that really, really helped her organize and structure her time. So, examples of assisted technology or programs, we're talking about things for dyslexia, reading pens. They're special pens that scan printed text on the page and then reads it aloud via earphones to the user. Text to speech software, mind mapping apps, structured interventions like toe by toe, Nessie, or precision teaching, access arrangements in exams, allowing extra time, having the provision of scribes or modified papers.
Absolutely. And, my daughter now, this is her job. That's what she does as a software engineer, is developing these things, which has been incredible, really, considering she was diagnosed with this herself. And again, these tools aren't about giving an unfair advantage. They're about leveling the playing field and protecting a child's right to access education.
Absolutely. Dyslexia can be challenging, but it's not a barrier to achievement. And some of the most creative, successful people in the world are dyslexic.
Yeah. So I think, well, let's leave you with this reflection. I think, are we seeing dyslexic learners through the lens of difficulty or the lens of strength and potential?
Yeah, that's such an interesting question, isn't it? Early identification, inclusive teaching, and genuine family partnership, all of these aren't just educational tools, they're safeguarding tools.
Yeah, and every dyslexic child, deserves to leave that school believing they're capable, resilient, and valued.
Absolutely. So thanks for joining us on this episode of Safeguarding Conversations. Please feel free to share it with your team. And maybe this week, take the time to ask, what are we doing to make our classrooms safer for children with hidden learning difficulties? You might also like to access our YouTube video on attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, presented by Delith Hughes, who's Senior Leader for Children's Mental Health Recovery Unit. See you next time, and remember, safeguarding is every adult's responsibility in every lesson, every day.